I'll go next here. I'm Peter Moyer. It's Francis and I are the ones who are going to co-coordinate this. I'm a retired emergency physician, and I'm a Brookline Rotarian. Next year.
Hi, and I'm Joyce Graff. I'm tech support for this meeting. I'm from Brookline. Terry, why don't I do a roll call? Terry, why don't you say hi?
Hi, I'm Terry McCarthy from the Rotary Club of the Brookfields. I'm
Thank
the
you.
past
Kenneth?
president and president-elect
Oh,
for next
great.
year.
Ken Davis Needham.
Congratulations.
Kenneth,
Ken Davis Needham Rotary.
Needham, Bernard?
Yeah, Bernard Green. I've been a member of Rotary, the Brookline Rotary Club for about 3 years. I'm also chair of the Brookline Select Board, and a former lawyer.
Phil Sandler?
Hi, Phil Sandler, Brookline Rotary, zooming in from Sarasota, Florida.
Thank you. Mackenzie?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Mackenzie. I know some familiar faces here. I got to attend some Brookline sessions last year. I'm a PhD student at Oxford studying peace. It was a part of my research. So saw the notification about this talk and wanted to join.
You're calling from England?
I'm calling from England. Yes, it's currently 10:03 p.m. here, but definitely not nearly as bad as 1 a.m.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Richard?
Hi, a special welcome to Dr. Odaba and also to Mackenzie. And I'm Richard Segan, and Bernard did not mention that he's co-chair of the Boston Metropolitan Rotary Peace Work Group. Thank you, Francis and Peter, for leading this Peace Academy series.
You're welcome.
Lois?
I'm Lois Sokol. I was a member of the Needham Rotary Club for many years.
Great. Elizabeth?
I'm also a member of the Needham Club, and nice to see everybody and some of you again. I'm glad to see some more members. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon?
Hi, I'm Sharon Herman from the Brookline Club.
A few words about the course for those of you who've been involved, or for those of you who haven't. This is the third of 5 sessions. We're going to have 2 more in 2 weeks and 4 weeks. Again, today's session in particular is on the Global Peace Index, which is a measure of unpeacefulness around the world, which I bet you Dan will touch on, is in a sorry state. And the next 2 sessions will be on the 4th and the 5th modules. This is the 3rd one. So I just want to, I'm sure other people are about to do it, namely Francis, but I wanted to thank Dan for joining us. It's a great pleasure. I really look forward to it. And I just heard somebody else say that's the reason why they joined. I'm eager to hear Dan's experience. And I first want to ask Francis to introduce him.
All right. So we have Roger Lipson from Brookline and Alain Duchemin from Cambridge.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and most especially thank you to Dr. Dan for being part of our learning experience tonight and for using his skills as an experiential learning facilitator and an academic and a researcher in diplomacy, peace, and conflict resolution. He's worked for more than 20 years both doing the research, but also the teaching about the topics and being in the field itself. He's taught at the Department of International Relations at the United States International University in Africa, at the Center for Disaster Management and Humanitarian Assistance, and at even at the Rotary Peace Center at Makerere University. So he's widely sought after, and we're very fortunate to have him. His credentials are very extensive, but most of all, I think for our community as Rotarians, he's passionate about peace and disaster risk management and has implemented numerous humanitarian projects. So he brings both the theoretical background but also the practical experience in taking that and converting it into useful materials in a project. And so I think we're very blessed. He is also a Rotary Peace Fellow and a Rotarian. Um, Dan, I could go on and on, but I'm going to let them find out who you really are and let you go ahead and begin your talk. Thank you again, Dan. Thanks everyone else.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm just the immediate past president of my Rotary Club. I handed over my reins of as a president early May, and I became a Rotarian on 7th of November 2020 during COVID times. I was actually admitted in the hospital, and I was inducted online. And the district governor at the time, I had to do the induction. I had to remove off my masks to recite, the citation to be a Rotarian in my hospital bed. So because I say that if I have to die on this bed, let me die a Rotarian. So I was also glad to be featured in the RI magazine for February 2025. If you happen to have access to the RI magazine for last year, February, I was featured there as having passion to join Rotary. So this evening presentation, I'm glad that we could make it. The internet looks good, though it's raining heavily outside there. And I'm going to do a presentation on the Global Peace Index. So this Global Peace Index is the 19th edition of the Global Peace Index, the first one having been produced in 2007 by the Institute for Economic and Peace, which is a renowned global think tank, which is based in Sydney with global offices in New York City, Brussels, Mexico City, in The Hague, in Nairobi, in the Philippines, and in Nigeria. So I'm happy also to mention that I'm the immediate former director for East and Southern Africa for the Institute for Economic and Peace, a role that I served for 1 year until I resigned on health grounds on September 15th last year. But because I'm still the ambassador of the Institute for Economic and Peace, I keep sharing the research that they share, especially, for example, the Global Peace Index. They not only produce the Global Peace Index, and they also produce what we call Global Terrorism Index. They have also what we call ecological threat reports and other reports. If you can visit their website, you see they have a couple of annual reports that they produce every year. So without wasting more time, I just go straight to my presentation. If you can see my screen, so this presentation is for the 2025 Global Peace Index that was released in May this year globally. So this is the 19th edition of the Global Peace Index. So I'll delve directly into the presentation, and I request that if you have any question, I'll be happy to respond once my presentation is over. So as I said before, the Institute for Economic and Peace is a global think tank and independent and not-for-profit. And many of you may not know that is a very close ally. They have a working relationship with Rotary International, whereby many of its data is used for Peace Fellows training in many peace centers across the globe. And I'm glad to report that I've also been involved in training Peace Fellows at the only Rotary Peace Center in Africa, in Kampala. And also, the Global Peace Index is based on it's based on what we call 23 indicators in research. They look at 23 indicators. Some of these 23 indicators in 3 domains, major domains. The first one being they look at the ongoing conflicts across the globe. And the ongoing conflict, they look at what are the internal conflict deaths, the external conflict deaths, internal conflict intensity, etc. The other domain is on safety and security, where they look at issues like the homicide rates, perception of criminality, police rates, etc. And then the last one is militarization, where they look at how much does a country spend on its military as opposed to other key sectors of the economy, like, for example, healthcare, educations, etc. Because you realize that many countries spend a lot of their GDP on militarization as opposed to pumping a lot of money on each to do with the healthcare, education, or agriculture. So those are the three domains: ongoing conflict, safety and security, and militarization. In total, there are 23 indicators that they are measured. And also one thing that you need to know is that the Global Peace Index is assessed from 163 countries across the globe, which translates into 97.3% of the world's population. The reason why 163 countries is because they don't measure countries that has a population of less than 1 million people. So if you look at these three domains, the only statistically positive is that we have to look at countries which have more than 1 million people, and these are 163. That translates into 97.3% of the world's population. So the other issue is that we need to understand the latest Global Peace Index talks about what we call about political fragmentation, whereby for the 19th edition, it is at its highest since the World War II. And we also see that the middle powers increasing their influence, whereby we see countries which are middle powers, which I'm going to mention, they have increased their influence since the last edition of the 18th edition. Also, this year's index shows that 59 active state-based, we have 59 active state-based conflicts, whereby we have also 17 countries with over 1,000 conflict deaths. And also we have 78 countries involved in a conflict outside their own borders. This means that many conflicts are at risk of escalating, and most exciting conflicts have at least one factor that increases the likelihood of escalation, and particularly high risk in Syria, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Kashmir in Pakistan. We also, when you look at the other domain of increasing militarization, we see that 84 countries have increased their relative military expenditure in the past year, and 50 of these countries have decreased in their military expenditure. Europe is leading in increasing military expenditure, and peacekeeping or peace building expenditure is down to 34%, and peacekeeping also down by 42%, whereby they contribute less this year compared to the other year on issues to do with peacekeeping. So what happens there is that if you look at this picture just shows that the average level of global country peacefulness has deteriorated by 0.36%. And this is the 13th deterioration in the last 17 years, where we see the global peace has deteriorated by this percentage. And we see also that 74 countries became more peaceful in this edition, while 87 countries' peacefulness deteriorated. The other thing about this index that the overall score, if you look at this map, it shows you the overall score of the global peacefulness. If you look at the map, this is the world map. You look at the map that is indicated in red, it shows that the countries that are high risk in terms of conflict, and the countries that are relatively, that color is greenish in color, they are relatively peaceful countries. So this means that moving forward, that least peaceful country for the first time in the Russia is the least peaceful country for the first time in the Global Peace Index history. And you know this is attributed to the war in Ukraine, and over 1 million conflict casualties in Ukraine war so far, where we have also conflict which has expanded into Russia because also Ukraine is retaliating with the Russia invasion into Ukraine territory. And also we see that conflict has also expanded into the Russian territory. So moving forward is that you also need to understand, to know what are the most peaceful countries in the world today. The first country is Iceland, which is in Europe. We have Ireland, New Zealand, Austria, Switzerland, Singapore, Portugal, Denmark, Slovenia, and Finland in that order. And 7 of the 10 most peaceful are in Western and Central Europe, while 25 of the 32 European countries have increased military expenditure. As mentioned before, is that militarization is a domain in terms of how the peacefulness is calculated. And we see how European countries have increased their military expenditure. That's why we see 25 of the 32 European countries have increased military expenditure. How about the least peaceful? Look at number 1. Russia is now the least peaceful country. Also Ukraine, Sudan, Congo, Democratic Republic. We have Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, South Sudan, Israel, and Mali. Now, when we will have the next index, the 20th edition of the Global Peace Index, these figures are going to change because of what we are going through right now, because of the Middle East, the war between Iran, the US, and Russia, and Israel, sorry. So we'll see these figures will change drastically when you look at the 20th edition of the Global Peace Index. So all the 10 of least peaceful countries are also engaged in at least one conflict. And you see all these countries, like for example, the least peaceful countries, most of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, moving forward, is that we also have the biggest improvement in terms of peace. We have the first country that has improved in terms of peacefulness, Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has really improved, and this is attributed to the conflict with Armenia is almost unwinding, and this has made Azerbaijan, the land of fire, they call it, to have declined in terms of improved in terms of peacefulness. Then you have Saudi Arabia improving political stability, and also UN peacekeeping funding. We have, surprisingly here, Uganda, our neighbor from a neighboring country, Uganda here, also falling militarization. And also Uganda has also increased in terms of the military expenditure in peacekeeping. So you also have Peru, which is attributed to the fall in violent demonstrations, and also the Gambia, attributed to falling political terror and violent demonstrations. Moving forward, we also have what we call the biggest deteriorations in peace. Countries that have deteriorated in this index, we have like Bangladesh, and this is based on what we know about the civil unrest that happened in Bangladesh the other year, the violent demonstrations that took place, political instability, and also Ukraine, because of the internal safety and security falling, and also secondary effect of the war with Russia. We also have Russia also, the Kursk offensive. The Kursk is a region that has been affected because of the offensive from Ukraine, bringing the war to the Russian soil. And also in Africa, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the conflict between the government and the M23 rebels, which is escalating rapidly, even though the other day they signed a ceasefire deal in the US under President Trump's administration, but we are yet to see the impact of this conflict deteriorating. Then we have also Myanmar has also deteriorated across the 3 domains, the militarization, the issues with the conflict, etc. So moving forward, the Global Peace Index also tells us that peacefulness has declined for 13 of the past 17 years. And 87 countries, as I mentioned before, deteriorated, while 74 improved in peacefulness. And this is just a graphical representation of these figures, where between 2008, where we had the first Global Peace Index, until today, this index of 2025, how the peacefulness have declined for the last 17 years, and how countries have either deteriorated or improved in their peacefulness. The other thing that we need to know about is that the Global Peace Index also results also countries with over 1,000 conflicts and deaths. And we see these countries, if you look at the image on the screen, talks about Sudan having 6,908 deaths during that year, Russia with 1,965, and all these countries. These are countries that have over 1,000 conflicts for the past year, in this year's Global Peace Index. And also, we also have what we call that we have more than 100,000 conflict deaths in 8 of the past 10 years. 98 countries also involved in an external conflicts between 2019 and 2023. And this is just some graphical representation of these statistics that shows the total conflict deaths, external conflicts fought, and intensity of internal conflicts. And the Institute for Economic and Peace uses this data from various sources, like, for example, the European Union, using the EU calculations in several domains. And also they get this data from like the World Bank and many UN agencies. And this data is also verified from a panel of experts globally who verify that this it meets the threshold to be able to be shared across various stakeholders. Now, we also have what we call the great fragmentation, whereby we see the world is entering a new era after the end of the Cold War and the decline of globalization. And all this is going to shift and change. When we will have the 20th edition, we'll see the difference in those domains, especially because of the ongoing war with Iran, spearheaded by the US and Israel. Then you also have that the middle power countries have also significantly increased in influence. 14 countries with significant influence in 1991, and then 34 in the 2023. And what are some of these countries? Countries with the greatest, largest increase in influence are like Turkey, Chechnya, India, South Africa, and Hungary. These are countries which have interest, vested interest in different parts of the different parts of the world, and they have increased their influence in these countries. Like, for example, you find like countries like the BRICS, due to economic reasons, they have a lot of influence in countries in Africa and in Asia. And that's what we call the great fragmentation. But of course, the US remains the most influential country, followed by China. However, great power influence is peaking. China may be at the zenith of its influence as we speak, because the Chinese gross debt is at now 300% of their GDP, while inbound and direct investments to China is at 20-year low. Then we have traditional powers like the UK and France recorded the largest drop in influence for the past year. So what are some of the trends in peace or geopolitical fragmentation? We have the 3 distinct geopolitical eras in the past 50 years. When you talk about a Cold War, globalization, and the great fragmentation, we also have as the influence of the great power countries have declined, many middle power countries are increasing their regional influence. As I said, like France, India, South Africa, Brazil, there are middle powers that are coming in, and some of the key indicators is financial, mobility, political, and trade. And this is just a figure to show you how these countries have increased, middle powers have increased their influence in the geopolitical fragmentation index. So the other thing that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to share with you is that at the end of the Cold War, China and the middle power countries had limited influence. Like, for example, you look at China, China had limited influence in countries like Iran, Pakistan, China, Myanmar, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Congo Kinshasa, and Zimbabwe. While Turkey also had a little influence. And then also we have Australia, had some influence in the PNG, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Fiji, Australia, and New Zealand, and also Samoa and Tonga. So these are some of the countries that at the end of the Cold War, China and these middle power countries, they had limited influence in these countries. So by the end of 2023, China also had a strong influence in almost every continent, and middle powers were exerting a strong regional influence. As much as China had strong influence in many continents, like Africa, you see the countries like in India, in China, in Asia, sorry, China had a lot of influence in all those countries that are indicated by those arrows. And also, Turkey also had some influence in countries like Russia, Hungary, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, the United Arab Emirates, Malaysia, and Somalia. And also you can see where Australia also had some influence, and also India had some influence in some of these countries as shown by those arrows. So what we also need to understand is, like, as we Rotarians, every day we strive to address issues of conflict prevention and resolution. We also need to know the economic impact of violence. Today, the economic impact of violence as of the 20th edition of the Global Peace Index is at 11.6% of the GDP. And this translates to $19 trillion purchasing power parity. This is a lot of money. If this money is channeled into developmental agenda like for health, education, the world will be more at peace as compared to all this money being spent on conflict or peace building. And this translates to $2,455 per person as a cost of violence today. So you can imagine $2,455 dollars per person as a cost of violence. This is a lot of money. If channeled into developmental issues, it will go into making sure that we have a peaceful societies as compared to what we have today. So over 40 countries have also less per capita income, according to these statistics. We also have that the military and internal security spending for almost 3/4 of the total economic impact of violence. This domain of militarization has really been affected because many countries spend a lot of money on almost 3/4 of their total budget. And this is spent on issues to do with the violent crime, military expenditure. You see it's 45%. We have also internal expenditure on security at 29%, private security, other issues to do with security, and homicide issues and suicide issues also. And those also the military expenditure at more than $2.7 trillion in this year's GPI. So the other thing is that the risk of internal conflict is being heightened by the high level of debt servicing in most developing countries, whereby if you look at this, the presentation also shows you that countries in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia or Asia Pacific, North and Central America, Middle East and North Africa, Western and Central Europe, Eastern Europe and Central Asia or South America, this graph shows you how countries are spending more in terms of servicing debts as compared to other countries. This tells you that the risk of internal conflicts is being heightened by the high level of debt servicing, because today many countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, as you see in that graph, spend a lot of their budgetary allocation to servicing existing debts as opposed to developmental issues. Then the other thing is that also the economic impact of conflict is that the opportunity cost of military expenditure, whereby European expenditure is 4 times higher than Russian spending, but capability is only 33% higher. Increasing military expenditure risks reducing social cohesion at a crucial moment. When we talk about social cohesion, we're talking about issues to do with education, health care, agriculture, etc. So it's very important that these countries need to be advised on how best to go about spending this amount of money, not only on military expenditure, but on other social issues that are going to be crucial to the communities. So peace building expenditure has fallen by over 40% relative to military spending, while the number of peacekeeping troops has fallen 42% in a decade. This is just conflict escalation. And also some of the issues that came out of this research finding is that conflicts are getting harder to solve. In the 70s, 73% of the conflicts finished with a victory or peace agreement or ceasefires. And the 2010s, it has dropped to 14%. And you see now we are just in the month of March and we have an ongoing war, which is involving multiple countries. And we don't know how the statistics will be when we have the 20th edition of the Global Peace Index. With so many active conflicts, the chances of some of them escalating rapidly is increasing. And the Institute for Economic and Peace has identified 9 factors which greatly increase the risk of conflict escalation. And these 9 factors are some of the factors that we need to look at as Rotarians to be able to see how we can incorporate into our communities in our own little ways. So this image here just shows you how escalation and risk hotspots exist in the world today. Where are the conflicts more likely to escalate? You look at the Syria, we're looking at Kashmir, we're also looking at Ethiopia, Eritrea, we are looking at the Democratic Republic of Congo with the M23, and also South Sudan. But now we're also looking at Iran, Iran, Israel, and other countries where we have seen Iran trying to retaliate in terms of airstrikes to these countries like Jordan, like the United Arab Emirates, etc. So this is going to change when we see the figures that are going to come up in the next Global Peace Index. So what can we as Rotarians do to be able to make our communities be safer? So one of the models that the Institute for Economic and Peace has tried to develop is what we call incorporating what we call a positive peace framework. A positive peace framework into Rotary projects, whereby we have to ensure that we have what we call the 8 pillars of positive peace are incorporated into the 7 or 8 areas of Rotary's areas of focus. For example, talking about having the equal distribution of resources, making sure that we have what we call respect of the rights of others, a very important pillar. When we respect the rights of others, we are going to have a cohesion in the communities. The other one is talking about having good relations with neighbors. Because when you have good relations with neighbors, the chances of you being at war with each other are very slim. The other one is that increasing what we call high per capita in terms of education, whereby we make sure that we have people who have gone to school, who have education as a forefront of economic peace building, whereby people have education and they're able to solve problems and innovative ideas to solve problems within their communities. And also having what we call free flow of information is very crucial. We live in the era whereby we have a lot of disinformation and misinformation, and this is very detrimental to peace building. And so some of these 9 areas whereby the Institute for Economic and Peace has identified, for example, the urban origin onset of violence, accessibility terrain, high logistical supply, non-state actor and heavy weaponry, significant external support, private military contractors, and high levels of ethnic inclusion. The other thing I forgot to mention is that one of the most important pillars that we always share with Rotary Club is that in all areas of focus of Rotary, whenever a club is doing a project, they must ensure that also they incorporate the pillar of sound business environment, whereby they make sure that communities, you don't go to solicit for community. If you're building a school or a hospital within a specific community, you don't import raw materials from very far away. There are people, business people within those localities that you can use them to buy local materials, and that way creating cohesion and together also creating employment for people and volunteers within these communities. So these 8 pillars of positive peace can also be gotten from the website of the Institute for Economic and Peace, and you can get to know, and you can also feel free to reach out to me or any other positive peace activator to guide clubs on how they can incorporate positive peace pillars in Rotary projects, especially focusing on the areas of focus that Rotary really participates in. Like, for example, we just left the month of February of peace building and conflict resolution. Now we are in March, and every month we know it has a theme. So every project has what we call, if we incorporate these pillars, that the statistics show they have an impact that is going to be felt on the ground as opposed by not incorporating these pillars. So as I come to almost the tail end of my contribution here in summary, is that the world is entering into a polycrisis era, whereby geopolitical fragmentation, rising conflict, and cheaper asymmetric warfare can be seen as what we're experiencing today. We have also international institutions are falling to adapt to this new era, and support for peacekeeping and peace building is falling. And countries and communities need to up their game to make sure that this does not happen again. And also we have what we call the middle power countries are playing a key role, and also traditional powers are waning. Rising wealth is in creating more countries active in their regions. And also the world needs new regionally focused institutions, as well as solutions that can address global problems in an era of fragmentation. And this is where Rotary International comes in, whereby Rotarians pull resources together and use their technical know-how and expertise to try and be able to do peace building in their own little way in countries or communities where Rotary exists. So, ladies and gentlemen, for you can get involved with the Institute for Economic and Peace. There's what we call the Ambassador Program. There's also strategic partnership, like the Institute for Economic and Peace has strategic partnership with Rotary International, whereby they teach clubs about implementing projects using the 8 pillars of positive peace. They also have what we call the positive peace trainings every now and then, and they also have IEP Peace Academy. And I'm glad that I'm part of this initiative with the Boston Rotary Work Group to have these online sessions to enlighten Rotarians and be able to have an impact in an own little way. As I finish that, I don't know how many of you remember, we had the first woman Nobel Peace Laureate from Africa. She was called Professor Wangari Maathai. I was lucky to be taught by her in the University of Nairobi. She passed on. She got a Nobel Peace Prize in the year 2004. And she used to tell us that as peace builders, we must be like hummingbirds. A hummingbird, we all know what is a hummingbird. She was telling a story of this wildfire that was burning a big bush. And this bush was inhabited by big animals, the elephants, the lions, the buffaloes, etc. But when the wildfire was consuming the forest, all the animals ran away. So the hummingbird could run up and down to the river, which was next to the forest fire, picking water with its beak and dropping little drops of water to that huge forest fire. But the fire could not get finished. And the lions, the elephants with these big trunks, they could just sit by and watch the forest get destroyed. So as Rotarians, we can be the hummingbird. We do our peace building in our own little way and help our communities be better tomorrow than they are today. And so those are social handles that you can get the Institute for Economic and Peace and the Global Peace Index on the Facebook. They're on Instagram, they're on X, they're also on the website, The Vision of Humanity. You can get more reports of previous reports of the Global Peace Index and presentations that you can also use in different clubs and share with Rotarians and Rotaractors from wherever they are. So thank you so much for listening to me. This is the end of my presentation, and I would like to request that if you may have a comment or a question, I'll be glad to be able to respond to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. The floor is open for questions. If you can use your raised hand, then we'll try to call on you in order. That's a lot to take in one short time here. Go ahead, Mackenzie.
Hi, thank you very much, Dr. Odaba. Really appreciate that talk. This is very up my alley and related to the research I'm doing. It's very interesting. I had a couple questions. Maybe I'll start with one because I don't want to take up too much time because I know other people have questions too. But so one of the first questions I was thinking about, you mentioned in this new age, this new order where I was at a conference today too, where they were talking about very similar topics about this post-World War II, Cold War, more rules-based international order is receding, and we're entering a more chaotic, more anarchic order. And like you were saying, these middle powers are gaining, more influence. They're gaining more military power. They're militarizing more. and obviously that's negatively impacting their peacefulness scores. So I was just wondering, do you have thoughts on how to address these middle powers, because I think they also feel a lot of pressure to militarize to protect themselves from threats from China. The US is becoming, more and more unpredictable too on a global stage. Um, so just how do you address that? Because there are these fears that they have, that they feel like they have to militarize to protect themselves, but then obviously that is a negative influence on their peace scores. I just was
Okay.
wondering what your thoughts on that were.
Thank you, Mackenzie. That's a very good question. Thank you very much. For me, my thoughts will be that regional organizations or regional blocks, like for example, if you look at in Africa, for example, we have the African Union, we have the West Africa, SADC, South African Development Corporation, we have the East African Community, we have the regional blocks. All these organizations, like for example, we have ASEAN, are very crucial in having frameworks that they can make sure that these frameworks are implemented with countries in these regions to have what we call national action plans that they can implement in their own countries to make sure that as much as the countries gain economic prowess, they should not feel like this because now I'm becoming more richer today. I need to empower myself militarily as opposed to empowering people to do agriculture, to do education, to do healthcare. Because when like you saw what happened during COVID. Many countries suffered because not very many countries had very good healthcare system across, in their countries. So if effort can be channeled through these regional blocks or international organizations, have frameworks that countries can implement and have the what we call national action plans. This can go in a long way ensuring that countries have what we call sustainable peace and cohesion amongst themselves. And also not forgetting that adopting what we call a positive peace framework. And for example, when you talk about the pillars of positive peace, especially when you talk about the pillar of having good relations with neighbors, because if you're my neighbor, Mackenzie, and I'm having good relations with you, there's no way I'm going to have to go into war with you. But take, for example, Israel and Palestine, or Iran and Syria. These are neighbors that don't have good relations. So basically, the chances of them going to war with each other is very higher than countries that have good relations with neighbors. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question?
I think Bernard.
Bernard has his hand up.
Yeah,
ahead.
Bernard, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think you sort of answered my question, but I'm trying to figure out how to sort of organize my thoughts on this. You mentioned a number of countries that were more peaceful versus those countries that are more violent. Are there factors in those countries that help make peacefulness more likely than in other countries? I mean, for example, you mentioned healthcare. And when people think about how to provide healthcare and other social services within their own communities, they're more likely to be thinking about other communities in a more peaceful way. I think that's probably the case. But what factors do you see in the countries that are more peaceful that can explain their behavior?
Thank you very much for this good question too. Now, one of the key factors, and I'll give example, is that having what you call low levels of corruption. It's very difficult to eliminate corruption. We cannot have zero levels of corruption. But when a country has low levels of corruption, that means that, for example, the Scandinavian countries are top 10 in the Global Peace Index. These countries, the citizens of these countries pay higher taxes to the governments, but they can see the results of these taxes because there's free healthcare, there's free education, etc. As opposed to countries that are least peaceful, countries like Yemen, the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, are most corrupt countries. If you look at, for example, the corruption perception index, You see, these are countries that are leading because of, when you have too much corruption, you collect taxes, but the leadership is very corrupt. So these funds are not channeled to build healthcare, agriculture, or education system. So these are some of the factors, for example, that can help a country to be more peaceful. Because if you have a country that is not more peaceful, people are going to go to the streets. Look at what happened in Sri Lanka. Look at what happened to Iran, the demonstrations on the streets, what happened in Nepal, because people become dissatisfied with their governments because the taxes that they pay, they're not seeing the healthcare being provided to them, the education, or other serious social amenities that they deserve. And then it makes these countries be less peaceful because people are going to protest and the government is going to react to crack down these people. And that's how you'll see these deaths. And when we collect this data is collected, we find these countries become less peaceful because of such kind of factors like high levels of corruptions. Another factor might also be having no free flow of information, because a country that people have free flow of information, devoid of misinformation and disinformation, they are able to make informed decisions. They have information that they can make informed decision as opposed to rumors or hearsay, etc. I hope I've answered your question.
No, it did, and it sort of gives you a sense of how the internal policies of a government can make that government more likely to be peaceful oriented, to the external world. I mean,
yeah, and just to add on that again, just to add on that, Bernard, is that one critical factor to keep in mind is that once we have a well-functioning government, it has a ripple effect into other factors. Like, for example, a well-functioning government will ensure equal distribution of resources. Some of the countries that are least peaceful is because the resources in that country are not distributed equally, like the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, etc. And for example, a well-functioning government can also be a unit of a family. If in your home you have like for example, I have myself 3 daughters, and I'm coming from work today, and I have only 2 lollipops, and like these 2 lollipops I give only to 2 of these girls. One of them will not feel nice, so that is an equal distribution of resources. She will start to descend, and that can make my relationship with her not be peaceful because I'm discriminating against her because I don't have to distribute equal resources to all of them. So this is also, if you have a well-functioning government, will ensure that the rights of the people are respected, there's free flow of information, we have equal distribution of resources, we have low levels of corruption. As I said before, it's very difficult to have 0 levels of corruption, but we can have low levels of corruption. Like the most peaceful countries have low levels of corruption. And then moving on like that, and also I'd like to challenge you, if you go to the website and look at what number is the United States on the Global Peace Index, and what are some of the factors that make the United States not be in the top 10 or bottom 10. Why? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Don't waste this precious time. Hi, Sharon.
I'm not sleepy. I can answer as many questions as you can.
All right.
Thank you so much. This was so obviously timely and informative. I just wondered how geographical, the geography of a country and where the country is located plays into all of this.
Come again, sorry.
I'm sorry. I just wondered how the geography of a country and where the country is located plays into the peacefulness.
Yeah, the geography of the country and the location of the country is a very serious factor in terms of peacefulness. Like, for example, if country X is located in a region that is perennially conflict riddled or a lot of violence, there'll be no development in terms of people are not going to move up and down to do business. You cannot move from, for example, to Israel to go to Palestine and do business because there's a lot of violence there. So if a country is located in a region where there's a lot of violence, the impact of that kind of factor has an impact also on peacefulness of this country, because the Global Peace Index is also calculate that as a factor to consider in terms of this country is least peaceful because the region where it is, like, for example, look at the countries that are most peaceful. Like, for example, Iceland. Where is Iceland located? Like, for example, the Scandinavian countries where they're located. Many of the countries in that area, they're very peaceful. They have good relations with neighbors. They have low levels of corruption. They have free flow of information. They have well-functioning governmental systems in place. And that's what contributes to their level of peacefulness. So sometimes the geographical location of a country within a locality has a factor in terms of the peacefulness in the Global Peace Index.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are your slides available for us to download? It's very, very interesting.
I'm sure Richard can be able to share them to everybody. Yeah. And also, Francis has the copies of this.
And also this presentation is recorded and will be available on your YouTube channel.
Thank you. That'd be great.
A question?
Yeah, Elizabeth?
Yes. Dan, these problems seem like they're insurmountable. Not only are these countries and many countries facing our internal struggles, but obviously the external struggles that are pressing on our peace. How do you see things kind of progressing? Do you think there's hope for more peacefulness or less? Or how do you think? I know that we can individually maybe do something, but how do we present some influence to make things get better or help things get better?
Thank you very much. One sure way of making things get better is having that strengthening the existing institutions. Like, for example, the UN is doing very little. I'll give you an example. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the UN has a peacekeeping mission there, the largest ever in the history of the United Nations. But you see, the Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the least peaceful countries in the world. Look at Sudan, South Sudan. We have a large contingent of US peacekeeping missions there. But South Sudan falls under the least peaceful countries. So if we strengthen and have mechanisms that are realistic and sustainable, they can be able to reduce this peacefulness in these countries. So strengthening and also having leadership at for example, the UN level, that is a global stage, and also at the regional level in terms of for example, in East Africa, African Union, the Asian, the Oceania, the South Americas, the Americas. This can be able to go into a long way, having what we call sustainable peacekeeping or peace building in these countries.
Thank you. Other questions? Oh, Richard, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I want to thank you very, very much, Dr. Odaba. This is a fascinating presentation. I think you covered a semester of coursework in very few minutes. So lots of substance here. One question I was curious about what your take is. The Global Peace Index, I think, is fascinating. I think it was fascinating as you were ranking countries and the different metrics. What's your take in terms of the value and how it's been used in terms of peacemaking, in terms of improving the world situation and decreasing the likelihood of peace? How is the GPI being used, I guess, is my question.
Thank you very much, Richard. One of the key roles of think tanks like the Institute for Economic and Peace or organizations like Rotary International is to implement recommendations that are made by these organizations like think tanks, that they do research, which is scientifically proven data. If they implement the recommendations, this can go into a long way, helping organizations like Rotary, for example, implementing a project and making sure that this project has a component of free flow of information, has a component of a sound business environment, has a component of good relations with neighbors. If we do such a kind of thing and we implement this kind of recommendations, because we have so many organizations across the globe that are in humanitarian space, they're in countries which have a lot of need in terms of humanitarian assistance, and then implementing these recommendations and also enacting laws and policies to be implemented in these countries, and also in programmatic project implementation can go ahead well in addressing the issues of conflict and addressing issues to do with sustainable peace building or peacekeeping. I don't know whether that makes sense.
And Mackenzie, I think you hit the last question here.
I was just curious what your thoughts about practically how do we strengthen the institutions necessary to institute these peace frameworks, because like you were saying, for example, like the UN, it doesn't have much power. So what are the practical steps do you see in getting like nation states to more respect institutions like the UN or domestic institutions as well? Like, how do you see building legitimacy?
Very good question. I think it's again, Mackenzie. One of them is funding. Funding is crucial. Increase in funding will go ahead in strengthening these institutions, and also not just funding, and having specialized or technical people to implement these policies or these frameworks. You might have an organization that is well funded, but you don't have people who have the technical know-how to go ahead and implement the relevant recommendations or policies that have been recommended in place. So funding is one way, and also having technical staff who know how to go ahead and implement these policies. And last but not least, networking and also learning from some best practices from other people. Like, for example, we can have case studies of where this has been done somewhere and see how best it can be replicated into another area. So networking and learning.
Looks like he's frozen, but we're at the end of the time anyway, so we might as well call an end. Peter or Francis, do you want to give any final comments?
To thank Dan for very stimulating piece. And I had just one question, not to be answered, but to be thought about. If globalization is meaning, what does that mean for an organization like Rotary? Don't know. So on that note, I'm going to switch it over to Peter. We will be continuing this series, and we want you to continue with us. Go ahead, Peter.
I want to thank everybody for coming. It was a very enjoyable session. I learned a lot, actually, and I kept wondering the same questions that people are asking, which is how specifically do we do this? Dan had some very good examples. So I was inspired, although it's a difficult time in history in our lives. I was inspired. And I wanted to thank Dan for coming. And I also want to thank Francis for getting him. She and he are fellow Peace Fellows.
Peter or Francis, can you say something? Our next session, for everyone's information, is scheduled for 2 weeks from today, March 19th. Do you want to say something about that session, Peter or Francis?
If you'd like, Dan has offered to stay with us through these sessions, either as a presenter and or participant. So if you'd like for him to continue, since he's not on the call, this is a good time to mention that or comment to Joyce or Peter, Richard, or me. Yeah, tonight was a lot of good information. So please join us and invite others. And here's Dan. Yay.
Yeah, he's back. Yay.
Thank you.
Francis, is it okay to invite people who are not Rotarians?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. Because I would have loved everybody to know to listen to Dan.
I think this is the IEP materials were not designed just for Rotary.
Okay.
time for
Great,
everyone.
thank you.
And so
Thank
they
you.
speak in very generic terms, and it'd be great for lots of people to know that kind of structure and the way of establishing some baseline data so you can know not just that you're doing something good, but that you're doing it well. And without the data, it's pretty hard to know that.
Yeah.
Dan, we were just singing your praises.
Yep.
Will you be
Can I suggest that we also think about, I mean, given that we live in this country, we're not going to be able to have much influence on the government increasing funding for the UN, for example. But there are things that we can do that will sort of create the way of thinking about organizations like the UN in this country that, you know, in the long term may have an impact. And yeah, I think getting the word out about presentations like this is one way that Rotary can play that little role that will have long-term consequences.
Let's invite people to come and share this experience and to also share in the thinking and discussion and then discussions that will follow from these sessions.
Great.
This just gives us a few seeds to work with, like the hummingbird.
Please go on YouTube and just Google the story of the hummingbird. It will be more inspirational, and let us all be hummingbird. Do the little you can in our little way. You just never know, you know.
We are constantly being bombarded by problems that we face, and sometimes we can get completely overwhelmed. The story of the hummingbird is about this huge forest being consumed by a fire. All the animals in the forest come out and they are transfixed as they watch the forest burning, and they feel very overwhelmed, very powerless, except this little hummingbird. It says, I'm going to do something about the fire. So it flies to the nearest stream, takes a drop of water, and it puts it on the fire and goes up and down, up and down, up and down, as fast as it can. In the meantime, all the other animals, much bigger animals, like the elephant with a big trunk, could bring much more water. They are standing there helpless, and they are saying to the hummingbird, what do you think you can do? You're too little. This fire is too big. Your wings are too little. And you're big, so small, you can only bring a small drop of water at a time. But as they continue to discourage it, it turns to them without wasting any time and tells them, I am doing the best I can. And that to me is what all of us should do. We should always feel like a hummingbird. I may feel insignificant, but I certainly don't want to be like the animals watching as the planet goes down the drain. I will be a hummingbird. I will do the best I can.
Well, that was excellent. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Peter
so
and Francis, Dr. Robert. For those who are on the planning committee, we have a meeting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and look forward to seeing you. Thank you.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much.
Right.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thanks very much.
Stay well.